Thank you for joining me as I explain how to coherently craft purpose into your messages. Messages can come in many forms, such as a PowerPoint presentation, email, phone call, text message, in-person conversation, conflict negotiation, and much more. The first step in understanding today's module is getting familiar with the road mapping process. The second step is understanding problem definition and specific solutions. After understanding the context, you have to understand your ecosystem or landscape. Because you have taken account of your ecosystem, you can now unify actions together, similarly like weaving individual strands of fabric together to make a beautiful sweater. Lastly, we need to pre-plan our process for evaluating the impact of our actions. This can occur in two ways: obtrusive measures or unobtrusive measures. Through the lecture, I'll go into more detail about these two types of follow-up methods. Remember, the main goal of today's module is to understand the framework, because if you understand the framework, then you can begin to inject purpose into your communication strategy. What is a roadmap? A roadmap is the process of sequencing your milestones. This means you are treating your plan to make purposeful change like a rocket entering space. When a rocket fires into orbit, it does not use all of its fuel at the beginning. It sections the fuel and even the compartments of the rocket into phases while it tries to exit Earth's atmosphere. In this scenario, a roadmap works similarly because you are identifying the milestones, which are your phases for liftoff to exit the atmosphere. Now, what are milestones? Milestones are the major events that involve your stakeholders. This means you're taking account both ethically and economically about your roadmap. You should always seek to understand the ethical implications of your solutions. Secondly, you should always seek to understand the economic implications of your solutions. As a leader, you have to understand that your actions and inactions have consequences as well as benefits. It is a matter of understanding who is benefiting and how we can minimize who is receiving the consequences. Now, who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders are the people your roadmap impacts. This means you are purposely identifying who is benefiting and who is receiving the consequences, along with the severity of both benefits and consequences. Stakeholders can be anyone, and they can even be groups of people along with organizations. It depends on your particular situation. However, the main way to identify stakeholders is to understand who is going to benefit from this solution and who is going to receive the consequences or cost from the solution. Now, why does this matter? We lead people, so our actions or inactions impact them. One of the key fundamental rules of a good quality roadmap is understanding how your solution works in the real world. That means you have to understand the impact on the people, the impact on the organization, and in some cases, the impact on the community. Later in the lecture, I'll show you a diagram to better illustrate these points. In understanding what a roadmap is, we went over the idea of it, the macro contents, i.e. milestones, how people are impacted, and finally, it is always important to stay grounded in understanding the motivation for advocating these purposeful changes. Now, what does a roadmap for communication strategy look like? Let's imagine that we are looking at our organization as a whole. We can scale up, we can scale down, as the name is interchangeable. For example, instead of organization, you could label this team, you could label this department, and so forth. After visualizing the organization, let's take the perspective of understanding the problem to really define it. Here we have our first problem. Let's label it number 1. Just like the first, we have discovered a second problem manifesting itself differently than our problem representing a circle. Continuing to discover problems, we discover there is a star with the organization causing issues. Lastly, we discover a triangle representing another problem. After understanding the problems, we're going to seek to find patterns. In business terms, we're going to perform a root cause analysis. If you notice our solution is a triangle, it's because 2 of our problems represent a triangle. It's a solid pattern. The common denominator indicates that a fundamental problem is causing multiple issues within the organization. So we define the problem and seek to solve it by filling them in efficiently with one solution. Now, because we have understood the problem to discover potential solutions, we can start to understand the impact on our stakeholders. We have to keep an eye for ethical considerations as well as economical, like we spoke about earlier. Imagine changing the standard operating procedures in your organization. That change is going to cause friction at the minimum because people have to learn new procedures. Secondly, management is going to need time to understand the new procedures that may benefit their workflow for optimization. Despite it being a benefit, there's still going to be a consequence, and in this case, the consequence is a cost. Now, just because a solution may seem easy, it is important to look at who is going to benefit. Who is going to receive the consequences, such as learning new procedures. Finally, you have to manage this change in trying to implement your solutions. Next, always ask for perspective, because with a different outlook, you can see the solution as it works to fit the organization's problem definition. As we can see, with a little change in perspective, we have a solution that will fix the problem. Now, you may be thinking, how can a solution built for triangles fix the non-triangle problems? At first glance, it would not make sense to put a triangle over a star nor a circle. But you have to remember that all things work together. After your solution, you're going to have to accept that everything is going to change. Now, this may be positive or negative. However, a well thought out roadmap typically improves the organization because it takes a systems engineering approach. Remember, the stakeholders are the ones directly impacted why the solutions focus on the main problems, which is why the stakeholders are covering the problems. It is not because they are at fault for the problems, but it goes to represent that they are going to be impacted. After fitting the solution to the problem, we always have to ask, does it make sense? If it does not make sense to do it, then you should reevaluate your solution, either in its mechanism or how it operates. You always have to make sure that it makes sense. Again, be sure to really understand how it will impact your people. During this time, you can even talk to them by holding a town hall event or simply through an informal conversation. Amongst the people affected, let's highlight the main agents. These are going to be the power players, the type of people within your organization that have sway or authority. When you identify them, make sure to add a hierarchy, because this is the basis of our ecosystem analysis. An ecosystem analysis or landscape evaluation is your process to coupling stakeholders to your unique messages. Because messages should never be the same, they should be tailored to the receiver of that message. This means if you're going to talk to the president, then you have to speak differently and choose different words than you would your colleagues. On a piece of paper or digitally through a spreadsheet, list them in hierarchy in terms of power or authority. Whichever you choose, make it consistent and always label how you created this hierarchy. This is because once you do this, you can keep it in play for a quick reevaluation of your ecosystem. After creating your system to place the stakeholders and main agents in hierarchical manner, use the space to the right of them to describe them. Really try to understand their values and priorities. By taking the time to do this, you could gain perspective of their side. Additionally, perspective gives us understanding into their opposition, which allows us insight for tailoring our action requests, call to action, or assisting us facilitate our own plan of action. Earlier, we did not reverse engineer our solution. We identified the issue from the ground up. In this step, we are going to reverse engineer our roadmap and work to identify 4 main milestones. If you decide there should be more, then let it be at your discretion, as frameworks enable you to modify as needed. After the solution, the understanding of the benefits that come from the solution should be identified. Next is going to be the action required to obtain those benefits. It should be succinct as possible, and do not worry if it is not, because if it is not, my fault, my apologies. So it needs to be succinct as possible, because it's going to help you really get to the core of your action. Think about it this way. If you're given one sentence versus a paragraph, odds are you would gravitate towards the one sentence because it's straight to the point and it gets its message across. Being succinct will always help you ferry your message from your mind to the person receiving the message a lot easier compared to a long-winded message. Now lastly, we are going to identify the problem. Remember, You defined it, so make sure that you try to be succinct because it is going to make the next step a lot easier. Let's marry the problem to the stakeholders' priorities. This means we are going to understand from their perspective how the problem affects them either ethically or economically. Now, let's marry the action plan to their value system. For example, you would not ask a timid manager to become abrasive, just as you would not ask an abrasive manager to be more timid. In both scenarios, the managers live within their strengths, and you have to account for their strengths because it represents their values in action. Lastly, make sure that the action you request each stakeholder to perform is reasonable. Remember, use their strengths to enforce reasonable actions to address organizational problems. If you notice, action is between the problem and the benefits. This is intentional because we're trying to squeeze action from our stakeholders by identifying the problem and its impact, along with the benefits that people will receive. Asking people to make change is a difficult task, and there is not a lot of situations where you can influence with 100% deterministic success. Everything we try to change is probabilistic. This means that you can only rely upon your due diligence to influence behaviors by addressing value systems, as value systems drive us through life and provide that motivation to perform tasks. This is our last check to make sure that the solution makes sense. Lastly, this is our opportunity to think of all the stakeholders along with the main agents in enforcing this change. As a reminder, not all main agents are going to be people in roles of authority, as it could easily include the popular team members that offer persuasive sway. As mentioned in today's agenda, we still have the follow-up process to create. One method to follow up is using obtrusive measures, which, just as the name suggests, it is obtrusive. It bothers another person. This could be talking to see how things are changing. This could also include how people are feeling. The main idea is that you are burdening another person, another individual, to check up on the progress. Our last method for following up are unobtrusive measures. Unobtrusive measures are less reliable, however, they have their benefits. For example, team members may not tell you the full story because of how the power dynamic works between you and them. Often, we use unobtrusive measures to understand situations from the outside in. This means you are looking at indicators to show progress. For example, if you want to measure corporate well-being, then you'll notice how often people smile or talk with kindness. These are subjective, however, they represent a method of gaining the truth without troubling other people. The goal should always be to make sure the indicators make sense, or you could be easily led astray. For today's module, we looked at understanding the framework in road mapping. We understood where the problem, definition, and solution fit into the roadmap along with their definitions. We went over how to perform a simple ecosystem analysis, also known as a landscape evaluation. Because we identified priorities and benefits, we understood how to craft unique action requests within a person's natural tendencies or strengths. You can choose to follow up subtly or obtrusively. The goal here is to always pre-plan it and make it make sense. For example, do not measure happiness by the amount of pizza bring to work. It just doesn't make sense. Thank you for joining me in Module 1, and I look forward to working with you in Module 2.